Welcome to the Nerds and Friends podcast. Today we have a very special podcast with our guest, filmmaker Chad Gloria. We've got our nerd on the road, Nathan, joining us from Kentucky, maybe?
Kentucky, yeah.
Nice.
Kentucky.
Nice. Then we got Will Shaw, artist extraordinaire, and the amazing Carey DuVal, man of many
Hello.
talents, joining us. So today our topic is the future of movies and AI. And I think it's a great topic that Chad came up with because I think the most recent thing in the news was the beloved James Earl Jones retiring and signing over his voice likeness to Lucasfilm for the use of AI to continue voicing Darth Vader using his voice. So let's jump into that. What are the ethics and concerns there and the possible repercussions and everything, Let's jump in.
Well, there's also a lot of definition things to talk about as well. So that absolutely is one aspect of it for sure. But that is the element of how it interacts with the future with actors. So I absolutely think that, like you said, there are, in my opinion, not obvious ethical concerns about, bringing the dead back to life. Obviously, if James Earl Jones is James Earl Jones, if James Earl Jones is, of sound body and mind and signing over rights, then that's one thing. But I do have concerns about pressure on contracts in the future for new actors, who are like, okay, look, you're going to be in this, whatever franchise. And in essence, the franchise owns you. And in 5 years from now, you may find yourself in a movie that you were never, quote unquote, in. Because of not just AI's ability to copy, your voice, but maybe in the future copy your likeness. But another theme, and the one I was kind of trying to hit on, is this idea of basically what does it take? What does the future look like when a computer can replace the writer? And we get to the point now where the whole movie is basically being made, by the AI system.
That's fascinating because, right now, like I've seen things on the internet, and I don't know how legit it is, but like where they'll give like an AI algorithm a prompt and it'll write something, and it's usually comedically nonsense, but that could change in the future. So
here's the first question I'd like to pose to everybody and get everyone's thoughts or answers. Raise your hand if you think that is something that is even possible, in essence, ever.
Oh yeah, that's definitely possible.
I'm not convinced that it's possible, but I'm also not convinced that it's impossible. I think that so far we've seen a lot from the technology, and I expect it to improve a lot over the coming years. There's our obligatory cat cameo.
Yes.
There will be at least one more, but I'll leave that as a surprise. But everything that I've seen, it's like the whole people are talking about how AI will be replacing artists or illustrators, but the more that I see the technology used, the less convinced I am that is actually going to be a possibility in the near future, since the more capable the computers seem to be at actually trying to generate these type of things, the more obvious it is that you do still need a human hand to actually control this process. And it may be able to give you a starting point, but it's not going to be able to outright replace it.
So to steelman your argument, could I say that you believe that there's a certain kind of X factor that the human, mind and soul can generate that the AI will probably never be able to, bridge the gap of?
Not at all. I think that the issue is more of the input of, you can only, like, when you're dealing with an AI program like that, it can only output based on the input that it's receiving. And so when you have somebody, especially at the higher levels of skill sets, those are things that you can't just program into an algorithm or a machine, because it's not like there's some secret X factor. As anybody who has worked to hone a skill over decades will be able to tell you, it's not that there's any like inherently special thing about being an adult human that makes you irreplaceable. It's that you need to spend decades honing this skill to have the proper understanding to actually create the thing that you're trying to create. It's
Well, allow me to push back there just a little
Mhm.
bit, though, because I would argue I don't think that it's the training part that makes it where now I can tell an original story, because I think a child can tell you the most original, you know, fantasy-oriented, imagination-oriented kind of thing. I think a lot of that skill stuff is the stuff that the AIs can do, because that is the 10 years that you took to learn what is really a bunch of rote structure. And that's where I don't have the strongest feelings anymore that it isn't something duplicatable, because I'll give an example. Relatively recently, The Green Knight came out, and that movie is based on an old Canterbury's Tale. We're talking, I don't know, some odd 500 years old. So because of that, it was really refreshing to watch a movie that was based on a story that is from before Save the Cat came out. And I'm so ingrained in a generation of writers who are thinking about, okay, here is the monomyth, and here is the Dan Harmon breakdown version of the monomyth, and here is the Save the Cat, by page whatever, this is where the story needs to be. And watching that movie was like, oh, it's so refreshing to see something that isn't just going off of all of these rote structures. But then my question, that's where I start really thinking, is like, well, if I'm already basically just being that algorithm and saying, well, hey, here's all my guidelines and here's my outlines, this is the part where this has to happen and here's the part where this has to happen, like, how defined can that get before I can finally just punch those rules into an AI and then tell it, okay, cool, spit me out a first act, the things that have to happen, hook it up.
Well, I think
I don't think that's entirely
Mhm.
out of the. Oh, sorry, Will, didn't mean to
No,
cut you off.
by all
But
means.
I really don't think that's entirely out of the question, because for anybody who doesn't think that an AI could write a movie, and this is as much a joke as it is serious, just look at the Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Sure. Yeah.
Hey, that was basically that was a whole crowd of people. That was a whole board of Warner Brothers that basically sucked all the creativity out of an idea to the point where it might as well have been an algorithm, because they're like, no, this works and this works and this works. And the thing that gets overlooked is like right now, especially when it comes down to the entertainment industry, and you see this across the board, movies, video games, books. You'll have a banger first outing of something, and then you'll have the machine take over. And Josh has told me about this on a lot of occasions, and I'm sure Chad, you're up on this too, where they're very concerned about the margins, and outside of somebody who is very established as a breakout individualist, like my mind goes straight to David Lynch, like
Tarantino.
David Lynch, Tarantino, and Tarantino
Nolan.
is a great example of Tarantino specifically, I think, is a great example of somebody who is paying homage to his inputs in a way that layers it with meaning. And I actually think that there's a good chance that I think there's a good chance an AI can get to that, because there's a couple things that people will feed into prompt and art wise where like this does look like, technically this looks like art, technically this looks like literature, but I do think that computers are getting more and more intelligent in that way, that they can just mimic things down to the finest detail. But I'm very much along with Will in that this is very much, or I'm one of you I'm forgetting, like, but this is very much inputs and outputs to me. Like, there's a certain amount of inputs, and there's a certain, like people talk about, like, here's the struggle, like you've talked about Save the Cat, or anybody, like, or the monomyth. Like, you could theoretically feed general concepts into an AI right now, and it would spit out something that's like 85% cohesive, and then 15% absolutely bonkers. And like, it just could keep getting refined from there.
Well, so there's 2 points. Like, first off, I would say, when I say could an AI write a movie, that maybe isn't as useful as saying could an AI make the next Transformers movie. And I think all of a sudden maybe that feels a little bit more realistic, right? Then I think, to piggyback
God,
on
Michael
what
Bay
you're...
would be so all over it too.
Well, right.
I hate this fucking franchise. Just,
well,
like,
he's
put
already
it in
doing
it.
it.
Yeah.
When 10 guys are in a room, like you said, in essence, we've seen this. It's that early scene in The Matrix 4. It's like it's that's what's happening. And when those people are making those decisions and they're looking at their computer and reading, you know, metrics, and then coming back and saying, well, it seems like the kids like hitting the whoa. Can we hit the whoa in the movie? At a certain point, that's really not that different than algorithmic input. But the question I have as well then, or not question, I think the next idea I would posit is going off of something Will was saying, and then you just hit on, which is the intermediate step before we get to full on, you know, Chatbot 9000 wrote this movie. Is Chatbot 9000 is like the, you know, the new age Clippy. So it's like, hey, so you're writing a script there, looks like you're struggling on your second act. Well, hey, here's based on, you know, millions of inputs, blah 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 blah. I could imagine a world where I've created firstdraft.ai and it knows the rule structures, and then we fed into it basically like, okay, let's say that the main rule structure we're using is save the cat. Well, save the cat is broken down by page. So it's like from page 0 to page, you know, 15, we need to have XYZ. So what I would do is I would feed to it, here is the first 15 pages of a million scripts, and here's the next grouping from a million scripts. So it's thinking about these things like section by section. And if it spits you something, like you said, that's 85% cohesive, well, that's a great starting point, you know, awesome. I'll hop into my script that's like 85% done, you know?
Well, and perhaps I think we should also rephrase, because immediately where my mind goes and where the conversation tends to go is like, not necessarily can you write a script with an AI, because obviously you can write a script with an AI. You could have a monkey write a,
even if it's just the alphabet, it counts. Like
literally having a lemur jump on a keyboard.
Right.
You could get a script eventually.
Directed by Baz Luhrmann.
But the important thing is, could it write a good movie, or can AI create like good? And I'm using
let's just say like let's say real or something, you know, basically just did it not break? Like, is it functional? Is there a screenplay that you say, hey, this looks like a screenplay?
Well, that is that's such a low bar though, because that is and like my point earlier that I was trying to make is that when you're at the higher levels of art, be that writing, be that writing like a script, a book, be it making an illustration, the AI can definitely follow all the rules. But the issue is that when you're at a high level of art, it's not a matter of understanding the rules and knowing how to follow them. It's understanding where you can break the rules or bend the rules to make your piece better. Like where you need to stop following the rules and where you actually need to go off the rails and add something different or change something.
Well, where I'll push back one more time though is a little bit what you're talking about sounds kind of like the feeling difference you may have already between a Quentin Tarantino and a Michael Bay. And that kind of what I'm getting at is that exists already, basically. You know, it's like you could argue that maybe a Tarantino is more of that high level artist. So when we're talking about an AI writing a movie, I don't think it's ever going to be the auteurs that are the ones trying to utilize this. It's going to be the studio that says, hey, buy me, you know, or rent me access, you know, a subscription to firstdraft.ai because we need to pop out, you know, some summer blockbuster every 20 minutes and give me 15, you know, triple X's or, you know, name XY action movie, you know.
Yeah, but
my brain goes to TV on that. And what I'm thinking, I'm thinking that really goes with Will is like, is anybody familiar with the Alejandro Jodorowsky Dune that never happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. That is like, I mean, there's about a billion things that went wrong, but one of the things that I really hear went wrong with it in a big way was the fact that the studios just like straight up didn't get what this like very avid French sci-fi artist and writer was trying to get across.
I didn't either, to be fair, but yeah,
exactly. Well, and like, well, again, he comes off as like kind of nuts, but like, I think that kind of the interesting thing about like baseline AI, it's really interesting. Like I've been learning a lot more about video games recently, and like having a video game structure that's like open world and having like basic AI and like things around you that actually like respond to stimuli in a really basic way it's a pretty monumental achievement when it comes down to like computing.
Mhm.
And I'm just thinking like your average civilian walking around in Grand Theft Auto, like basically they all respond the same way. Like if people go up and like push them or whatever, and they're all just kind of wearing different skins. I could see that as like a baseline. I could see that as like a baseline when it came down to like writing. My mind goes to like a sitcom, and I could see that like
Mhm.
being the baseline. But I also see what Will's saying, that like that extra, like that next level higher. Like I think the cool thing about like having an AI like this, if I can put on my rose-colored glasses and ignore the Terminator franchise, is is the fact that like there would be more of that like risk take, like hopefully the rising tide raises all ships, and there would be more of that risk taking on the high level of like, yeah, let's make the Jodorowsky Dune, let's make let's let Guillermo del Toro finally make At the Mountains of Madness, like all these like high concept things, whether it's prestige TV or like really good movies. Like it would be kind of cool, like aside from the auteurs that you do know, the Nolans, the Tarantino's, the Kubricks, if like basically that became a wider director pool, because that would be the like people would be willing to take more risks on cool stuff.
Well, my question, what is it? I feel like I missed the part where what is allowing for that?
Oh well, my thought would be the hypothetical of let's say an AI can write a baseline script.
Yeah.
And again, to put on my sassy bitch hat, the Big Bang Theory might as well have been
Oh,
written
God.
like might
I
as well
agree.
have been written
I agree.
by Google search nerdy things on the
Yeah.
internet, and then
Right.
input Alan West, who I love.
Uh,
I love Adam West.
Yeah.
He is not the problem with that. Love all the I like a lot of the actors in that show. I hate that
Mhm.
fucking show.
Yeah. 2.5 Men.
Yeah,
Two Broke Girls.
exactly. Like
Yeah.
there's a good chunk of stuff that it's like it's formulaic, it's going to hit the same numbers. I mean, heck, 90s kids TV, like there's always an
Yeah.
episode where they shrink, there's always an episode where they turn into kids, like
Body swap.
these
Where they go to the
bodies,
beach,
body swap. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
hot
the beach
springs.
episode. Always got to have hot service and hot springs and fan service.
Hot service
Like
and fan springs. I'm with it.
hot service and fan springs. welcome to the fan. Oh god, that's a Far Side comic if I've ever heard one.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But I could see like a lot of that like baseline stuff being like let's say like that stuff
Like
would
giving the
actually get
studio the
produced for cheap.
confidence that, you know what, okay, at least you have the baseline part figured out. So I can trust maybe a higher concept thing, which I think also goes with the Will situation. Will's talking about, it's missing that joie de vivre to get you to that next layer of knowing what rules to break. But if you were to treat it as that first draft and baseline, then it's kind of, then you're the guy who hops in for draft two and
Yeah.
figures out the, okay, now where do we make this interesting? The one thing I think I can't get my brain to get around is the idea of it ever being able to truly tackle dialogue. So it's like it probably would have a bunch of word salad between two people, but then you can hop in and go, okay, since I know what the scene's trying to do, let me come in here and fix this dialogue.
Yeah,
Well,
no
one
general
interesting point, though, now that we've reached that idea, is that with the Big Bang Theory, again, I don't like it either, but I believe it still holds record for the most profitable TV show ever, because it hit high levels of viewership,
Early.
and it was insanely cheap to produce. And so I see what Carey's saying is that if you have an AI spitting out, trash for the masses, I know it sounds elitist and shit, but like
That's what I'm saying.
some garbage sitcom, and they're able to generate large amounts of profit, they may be able to say, let's take a little more risk with these auteurs to give people who are into cinema a little more stuff to work with, because again, if their profit margin's higher, you can kind of take more risks. So
well,
Carey,
actually, that is
you
my
have
question.
convinced me to your camp, though, I think, for now.
Is that what you're saying, Carey? Are you saying that?
Actually, yeah, like basically,
Okay.
I could see AI spitting out a whole bunch, because like it's kind of like and this again kind of goes to what Will was speaking about, and actually I think Chad, you remember a couple years ago when it was like a real big scandal on YouTube that people were spoofing the algorithm, where like there were these people that were making 5-minute videos specifically for kids who got left with the iPad with
Oh
YouTube
yeah.
Yeah, the
where
whole
it'd be like
Elsa and Spider-Man
Yeah,
thing.
Elsa Gate stuff and that too, right?
all the Elsa and Spider-Man stuff,
Sure,
and
sure,
like
sure.
you
The
know,
Momo
people,
stuff, yeah.
yeah, exactly, because that was stuff that people could do on their cell phone for the price of a couple cheap costumes, and because it was getting to the widest and hot
lowest
take,
common denominator.
objectively least intelligent denominator, which
Yeah.
is
Children.
very small children who don't
Yeah.
have IQs yet,
And watch things on repeat.
and watch things on
parents
repeat.
who will just put their phone in front of a toddler,
Yeah.
and the toddler will just continue to watch whatever pops up next.
And
Exactly.
algorithmic feed, which is going to chain feed the children the next Elsa Gate video into the next Elsa Gate video into the next one. So yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I think that like that baseline of cheap and profitable might be the thing that could flip up to more confidence in.
See, I thought what you were saying was that the algorithm thing would be able to handle a first draft that the studios could trust that at least the baselines were taken care of, and then you can make it more weird. But actually what you're kind of talking about is a divide of, because I agree with you, if we were to get to a point where all of the new Michael Bay movies were being written by algorithm, then after society as a whole got used to the idea of watching computer-made movies, which, by the way, this is straight up outlined in 1984. It's called Prol Feed. So when people got used to Prol Feed, I think there would be a premium on like, ooh, this movie was written by a person.
Oh no, I legitimately just think that I legitimately just think that the baseline stuff is going to be post-capitalist hellscape.
Yeah, me too.
We can now fire a writer's room and hire one dude to just review what this algorithm has gotten to the 85% mark. And even though the dialogue makes no sense, we can bring in Bill, who we have chained Bill to the desk, and we are technically paying him not a living wage, not a subsistence wage, but we're paying him in chicken nuggets. And goddamn it, he wants chicken nuggets, and he will write the next Big Bang Theory.
We pay him well, no, it's just an intern actually. It's just an unpaid intern.
It'd just be an intern. Like this would be the lift. It would be right, but it would be like
yes.
Right.
It's even worse than an intern. It's just, you're right. It would just be that. It would be
you literally have to do it
in
a car. Let's just like
yeah. You have to go get in your car to do it, right?
And see, I think that you got like that is a very valid aspect for, especially with television, where you're like, yeah, we're gonna put out like this is just hot garbage, but it costs $12 an episode, and we're gonna run 50 episodes a season, and it's making that back no problem. But I don't see it going to like the huge big budget films like the Disney Marvel movies. I do see that they might be like your idea for like a first draft of a script, maybe, or like a second draft, like you put in whatever ideas you have for the first one and have it refine that for a second draft, and then you can go on to whatever way. But I don't think like you're not going to see, at least not anytime soon, like a whole like an Avengers movie that was written entirely by AI, because
I would like to hop in for just a second though to defend television. Because BJ Novak brought up a really great point recently, and he was saying that when he was coming up as a writer, a lot of the best stuff at the time was television. He was like, the biggest shows were things like Seinfeld, and another one that I forgot, but it's like shows that were actually
Twin Peaks, Mulder, Amazing Television.
Yeah, that would have been a bit early for him, but it was something that ran concurrently with, Seinfeld. But point being is that like Seinfeld is not necessarily a stupid show. He was saying that, he's like, no, it was actually the kind of show I'd want to write for. And yeah, there were King of Queens and stuff like that were doing great too. But it was like a lot of the best stuff happening on someone's TV was actually happening in television. So television writing seemed like the place to go. And he got to go work on The Office, which was another example of that. In a time period where we can be surrounded by a bunch of, when they did Tropic Thunder and they're making fun of Scorcher, with Ben Stiller, it's like, movie franchises have been plenty stupid themselves. So I do, it's just a bit of a caveat just to say, like, nowadays we live in a world too where a lot of the Emmys and stuff are going to things like Succession and when Game of Thrones used to be good.
I love, well, like good TV is like it's actually been taken on as something where like a story can breathe. And
right.
I love that they act like it's people have been trying to make Neil Gaiman let them make a Sandman movie for years, and like as a really huge fan of Neil Gaiman, I think I bring him up at least once an episode. And specifically Sandman,
get those royalties.
It's a 10-point trade, or it's a 10-book trade that in no way, shape, or form could be like even chunks
Yeah.
of it couldn't be a movie. It could be seasons of a TV show, but it had to be done well. And I
Mhm.
think Netflix has the right vibe for it. But like, yeah, like I love a lot of TV. I mean, hell, like as the resident lover of bad movies, and the finder of diamonds in the rough, specifically a couple of my favorite films. Like, well, I legitimately came in here prepared to say one thing when it came down to AI. It's like AI will never be good enough to effectively convince me that you are a person trying as genuinely to act tough as Jean-Claude Van Damme in the movie Hard Target. Like, you cannot convince me that an AI will be able to like put that general that
Mhm.
genuine soul into a
Yeah.
performance and still come up short.
Yeah. I think a lot of that, if we're talking about like AI concerning, CG representations of actors, because I did an episode relatively recently on our channel where we were talking about the future of de-aging. And
Mhm.
the guys I was working with brought up a really great point about how if you get it right enough, then
Mhm.
eventually what you've accomplished is not necessarily de-aging anymore. What you've accomplished is making a perfectly, eye accurate CG person.
Mhm.
It's kind of like, if you made a teleportation device, based around bending gravity, then what you would happen to have accidentally made when you succeeded is a time machine.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, that's
And
a happy coincidence.
yeah, and at a certain point, you also kind of run into basically VTubers as actors, where you have this 3D model that's being like you can take somebody's movements or voice, and they're just piloting around like a 3D model.
I
And
don't think you even have that guy anymore. I think you just go and do a bunch of, record, make them make every face and every phoneme, and you have them say, the fleet fox jumped over the round fence, whatever, and then it's like, all right, boom, boop, 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 boop. And then you go and put out your film, and then such and such, AI bot, or a Daniel Craig bot can just give you a perfect, Daniel Craig performance. Again, all these things I'm talking about are not today. But I do not necessarily see the absolute missing piece that makes it where these things don't work tomorrow.
Yeah.
And as much as today, I want to say that like there's the uncanny valley that these things will never be able to break past. They do get better all the time. And
Oh yeah.
I'll notice even within myself that there were points when I saw the dragons in Rain of Fire and was like, wow, these things are photorealistic. And even today, I can go back and say, okay, well, now I can see a lot of the weaknesses that we had from 20 years ago. That will keep happening. And at a certain point, the theory is that like our ability to perceive what looks correct or sounds correct coming off of a script, I don't think that that is necessarily infinite. I think there probably is an upper limit. And then the question is, what does it take for that thing to actually be able to breach that upper limit?
So I think there's another good parallel here with video games and video games specifically because like they are so graphic driven. Here's what I think is really interesting about that. Um, Originally you had things like the NES and the Atari, the really simple 8-bit stuff, and it basically like every time you doubled the amount of polygons or colors that you could have, things got more and more clear and more well defined. Then you get up to like the third and fourth generation of gaming consoles, and the difference between like 10,000 pixels an inch and 20,000 pixels an inch, like that seems like a huge number, but like visually there's only so much that the eye can take in. So there was an
Right.
upper limit to how much the eye could take in. And there like a lot of like really interesting smart developers, what they've done is like, okay, cool, like we don't have to keep pushing this so we have like absolutely photorealistic humans. We have this line where humans look realistic enough. We can work on like the smaller muscle twitches, how the face
Yes.
motion
Yeah.
capture works and all this. And the other
Lighting.
about that, yeah, is like, well, if you remember, like a few years ago, everyone was like, we're here to give you new graphics, we're here to give you better graphics, and they reached an upper limit of that, where it was like people weren't buying things for better graphics anymore. They
Yeah.
wanted like the good gameplay.
Everything
And
was good
from,
enough.
yeah, exactly. Well, and from there you had this resurgence of like retro gaming, where you
Yep.
have things like the Super Meat Boy, and
Yeah.
recently I've been playing Cult of the Lamb, where it's like it is a very, very well updated and polished version of something that uh theoretically doesn't look as good, or it's like but it's living up to the technology in a way that's really interesting. It'd be like and that to me, like the indie game boom is kind of like what I think would happen with like
Mhm.
auteur stuff, like the people, or what's that freaking Cuphead.
Yeah.
My partner was telling me that Cuphead, like everything about the game Cuphead, is actually hand animated in
Yeah.
that old school rubber band style. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
thought I thought that was the coolest freaking thing on the
Yeah.
planet. And that's not just a charm thing. That's like that makes that a labor of love, that makes people really
Mhm.
put a lot of effort into it. And I think that's kind of one of the cool things about reaching that upper limit is like, okay, now now people get creative on like a real grassroots level.
Yeah. And I think that's actually ties into another really interesting point of like there's a lot of interest for like the de-aging or creating essentially a CG model that you can have in your film for like a famous actor. But that only works right now because there is a certain degree of like uh, fascination around this technology. There's a novelty to it. And once that wears off, what you essentially get is that you have an animated character that no matter how good your animation is, in a few years, a decade or two, it's going to look really subpar. And what you could do instead is go the animation route, which animation looks better long term. It has a lot better longevity. You don't end up falling into the uncanny valley as much, and it's way cheaper to produce than that hyper realistic computer generated model that you have there. And like tying into video games, like Cyberpunk, which
Mm.
as far as a game, it looks fantastic if you ignore the T poses. Um, but if you compare that to the Cyberpunk animated show that came out, like the honestly, the animated show looks way better than the video game. And there's going to be a lot
Mhm.
of people that hate me for saying this, but I'm sorry, it's a hard truth. You're going to have to accept it.
Well, I think you're onto something, but I would push back pretty hard on that whether you think that you're correct or whether someone else thinks what you're saying is true or not, it has not slowed Hollywood down at all on going full speed ahead for the last decades of more CG, more photorealistic. Pixar bounced off of Disney, and Disney was like, oh, that CG crap looks terrible, let's not, we're the 2D people, you guys can suck it. And everyone got on board, and now it's like all of the cartoons are CG. Even the cartoons that look 2D are CG that is made to look like 2D. So I don't necessarily think there will be that point when they decide that, like, well, actually, I'd rather it just kind of, be more, of an artistic approach to it, kind of interpret it. I think we're gonna still be going just full steam ahead on like, hey, and then when it comes to quality, where again you could be making these arguments, it's the if I found out today that Vin Diesel's Bloodshot had been written by an AI, and was acted out by a CG puppet, that looked like him, I would be like, oh, you know what? Duh, I should have known that. Like, of course it was.
Well, you say that, but the reason that's funny is because Bloodshot was terrible.
Yeah, right.
And so that's kind of a tacit admission that AI and trying to put a CG model into like a live action space is just kind of in like it makes for an inferior product overall. And that's kind of the thing that we're seeing when we're trying to especially with like um a lot of new movies trying to instead of doing traditional effects, they're doing special effects through CG. And now we're seeing a huge resurgence of practical effects that end up looking much better than the CG.
But I still think
And
we're
in
seeing that
many
with the
cases,
auteurs,
we're seeing
though.
that cheaper. Well, we even
Yeah.
saw that with Star Wars, with the
Okay.
episode, what was that, 7? Before they panicked and started just trying to throw every
Yeah,
nostalgic
Force
thing.
Awakens. Yeah.
Well, my point would be, though, is like I also think that like Transformers 1 is terrible, but the movie still made
Yes.
$700 million. So it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
so it's not. I guess my question, I guess my initial statement isn't, will AI make the next Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind? It's, will the studios that are currently already behaving like AIs by crowdsourcing, hey, what's hot right now? What do kids like? We're getting all these metrics that shows that people have this attention span, so our movie should be this long. WB had already worked out some deal like a couple years ago with this company called Senolytics, where they have an AI that's actually like green lighting scripts. And so it's like letting them know, yeah, this is the script you should do. This is like the year or the time of year it should come out. If it had this kind of actor, then they would probably perform these numbers, whatever. Here's like these estimates that you guys can make decisions based on. Those kinds of soulless people who are not interested in the art aspect of movies, like I think they can probably get the next, whatever franchise that I think is terrible that makes 100 times more than the movies I do like, kind of a work in essence. Because there's plenty of movies that I'm like, they can't do.
We're all on the same board that like an AI is never going to write the next Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, that's just not possible. I don't think.
Oh no, yeah, you hit the movie. You hit the absolute movie that just could not be AI.
So I actually think all of these things are a measurement of time. So what I would argue is that today we could maybe get something that is pretty okay at being a helpmate for the writer. And it says, hey, look, man, based on everything else I've gotten and based on what you've written up to this point, or say that you have fed into me a pretty okay outline, I'm going to give you a rough breakdown of here's actually all your scenes and all your stuff, blah, 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 that you need, right? Here's all the pages you wanted. And it's going to be pretty terrible, but it's going to be this kind of like, worse than a first draft, like a nice half draft. Then in however many years down the future, that could evolve into, let's say the next step is just that it becomes a really good one and it has most of the work done and you barely have to tweak it. And then after that, it turns into something that can write Transformers and people say, yeah, I buy it. And then way down the road, I think it really is, because I guess the question is how mathematic basically are people. Am I something that is an input output machine myself? And when they make a movie like Marley and Me, and you do the thing that makes the people cry, and then the people cry, like that to me all feels super algorithmic anyway. It's
people
like,
cry in that movie. What are you talking about? No,
right? It's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna make let's make Bridge to Terabithia. Remember what happened in My Girl? Yeah. Let's do the opposite. And look, everyone's gonna cry. And it's like at a certain point, that stuff does feel a little plug and play. And we know this because as writers, for all of us who are, you watch movies and you do that. You sit there and go, yep, here's the Dark Night of the Soul. Here's the part where they gotta not be friends anymore for a little bit so they can feel bad. And then they're gonna come back and realize that, oh, actually, I missed you the whole time. Like those things to me make me feel very programmable, and that scripts are already taking advantage of how programmable we are.
I entirely agree with that. With one thing is that kind of makes the assumption that humans are really think in a very mathematical way, and I agree, but it's a very mathematical way that is incredibly flawed and bad. And that's the problem with computers, is computers are great at math to an extent. Like there's always going to be, like, computers are actually very flawed at mathematics because they're unable to compensate beyond a specific decimal point. So if you have anything that runs specifically on an algorithmic system, it will fail at some point. Yeah. But humans fail much earlier, and that's ends up being part of why when you have things that are computer generated, you always end up with a bit of that uncanny valley effect. What I think it's going to be, and what I think is going to happen from especially because this is what I foresee being the financially beneficial system, is that having AIs to write is going to become part of a tool set that like every writer is going to use. And I think that the problem is what we're running into with like construction, where you're going to end up with a lot of jobs available for people that are highly skilled, because I feel like the AI is going to take off a lot of low-level positions that would normally be filled with people that are building a skill set to move into the industry.
That's always the plan.
No longer going to be necessary. Yeah. And then you're going to have some very highly skilled individuals that are completing the process. In the same way that we don't see, like in construction, we don't have plasterers anymore. We just produce drywall and have them nail that to the wall. And so you end up with a lot of automation for these the low skill jobs that just get completely replaced.
Oh yeah.
And then you have a need for these high skill jobs and people and nobody to replace those people, since there's been no one in those lower skill jobs building the skill set to take over for these people. And like, I feel like that's really where we're gonna see here long before we get anywhere else into the industry. And
well, I think, kind of like Carey was saying, I think it's going to break into a bit of a haves and haves not situation. It'll be like, these are the screenplays that are made by studios in-house, and they will be AI assisted, and they'll have a team of very low paid writers, that are, like Ford, basically replaceable. And then there will be the Quentin Tarantinos that show up that are like, hey, here's a screenplay I made from scratch. This is just me. And there will be basically that bounce back and forth between the people who are like, hey, I want to watch Top Gun 3 that was made by whatever studio, in a vacuum of, writers and AI systems. And the other people who are like, no, I want to watch this, like, I want to watch The Lighthouse or something like that. I don't know if it would ever get to the point where it's like everything has to be, kind of unless it becomes okay, here's how it could. If it were to turn into the death of the writer, who has been like, hey, here's my screenplay, it would be because it was impossible to get funding. You could see that funding conglomerates would say that, okay, we trust the AI systems because we know that the AI, because here's a factor that you could work in. It wouldn't just be that, well, it could be, but I don't think it would just be the AI system telling you, hey, here's what your screenplay needs. It would be the AI system also working in, here's what would sell. So it's like, I'm going to take your idea.
Cheapest to produce.
Right. Or here's at least, like, based on your idea, based on who you think you have access to, etc. Here's what our predictions for what you could make are. So I'm going to write you a screenplay that fits within a budget that will still return a profit. And so then what happens is there'd be these kind of, not guarantees, but there would be these estimates that would make the budget people feel more comfortable to say, okay, well, we only want to back, AI assisted screenplays. So it becomes very, and like you said, as far as replacing people, when the Quentin Tarantinos retire, and there's no one who has the pedigree to back, behind them, then eventually those guys do all go away. And by the time my, grandchildren are watching movies, it's like, right, the only movies that can get funded are these, theoretically probably very, very watered down, generic, follow the rules,
yeah. At the same
Jurassic
time,
World Dominion.
Yeah. At the same time, though, I see that structure, which is looming at the corporate level. I see that creating an opening on the internet for a lot of independent productions.
Right.
I was just about to bring that shit up.
Yeah.
I think we have that now.
Yeah, Hell of a Boss is actually what I'm thinking of, where you have a very small number of people who are initially responsible for that, just creating I'm spacing out on language. Carey saved me.
Viral.
Viral
so if I can jump off what Will's saying, that I had like a utopianist view of AI explained to me at one point by someone who was smarter than me, where the utopianist concept would be that AI would take on all the baseline stuff so that humans could work on whatever creative pursuits and higher pursuits they wanted to. When it comes down to like and on that note, when it comes down to AI and what AI is going to do, whether or not it's going to be a tool, get you like past a baseline, make something more accessible or less accessible, I really like. I honestly don't think that I am smart enough or have the right inputs to know what's going to be like the next form of media, because I mean, think about the way that machinima changed everything in the early 2000s with guys with like Rooster Teeth that did Red versus Blue. Like it was a couple, like it was people that like to do comedy that found like that exploited a couple glitches in the original Halo game, and dubbed over it with words, and the end result is still pretty fucking funny, like to this day. but like
Yeah.
that didn't just change like that kind of content didn't just change the way that like that changed the way that everything worked, because now people got picked up by studios off of viral hits,
Hmm.
or making your has-been hotels, or
Or
your
Lights Out,
single
right? Wasn't that
lights
picked
out.
up off a viral hit?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lights Out was a viral video that got turned into a full-length film.
Yeah.
It was a decent horror movie. Uh like that, and like that's something that kind of like came out of left field, but also is like the reason that we have like streamers and let's players and the like is because and this is why I brought up Machinima.
Mhm.
uh the companies got together and basically like wrote it into law that this doesn't violate copyright. Like there's a couple things that you can't do with dubbing over a video game. But like if you're on YouTube, you can just play a video game that somebody else made, somebody else's content, and you can just talk over it as a let's play, or you can fuck with it and add voices and edit it however you want. And that content is like if there's a couple people like I'm recently getting into let's plays. Jacksepticeye, he's an Irish dude that's fucking hilarious, and he started doing Minecraft stuff. I watched him do an indie game
Mhm.
recently, and half of the entertainment of that video is watching a guy who is extremely jumpy get the shit scared out of him while he played a game. And he just
Mhm.
like he just was this high energy dude. Like he got to riff off something. It was very improvisational. It was very weird, and it's a totally different form of media than anything that I've experienced up to that point.
So
And I
I would
loved it.
to play devil's advocate, though, what I would argue is that all of these things would have come no matter what because the technology was moving forward. So, for instance, YouTubers became a thing as soon as internet quality and bandwidth, basically, and servo, not servo, what do you call it? The data storage
Mhm.
all
Mhm.
lined up and got good enough that the average person with their average home computer could
Mhm.
watch YouTube videos from home. And then when internet speeds and stuff, got average level good enough, Twitch became the next thing because now people could
Mhm.
live stream content,
Mhm.
from, these. So I think that these were just
Humans will
ways.
find a way to be creative with whatever tools that they have. And
Sure. Yeah.
that's what I think is kind of interesting here. So like even if you have an AI that's going to like write your baseline thing, like
Right.
the input of like I'm going to write a Die Hard butt, like
Yeah.
getting the baseline of a Die Hard film might be the thing that allows somebody to really make something that's completely out of the ordinary in about 100 different ways. And
And part of my argument,
whether that's a good thing or a bad thing might be
well,
up for I don't know.
part of my argument is that we're already kind of doing these things. A lot of what we're
Mhm.
talking about that the AI would do, like you said, it already is a thing to say that, hey, this is a Die Hard butt.
Mhm.
Josh and I are working on a show right now that you could say is a supernatural butt. And so
Mhm.
you do, and I consistently go through when I make my outlines and compare it to the
Mhm.
structures that we know. Like, hey, our show is missing this part. This is the part we're supposed to have.
Yeah.
So how do we go back and make sure we have that, and work these themes and stuff in that you're supposed to?
Mhm.
There's X, Y, and Z thing. Michael Haig says you have to have the external battle and the
Yeah.
internal battle. So how is the character dealing with something inside that will help him defeat
Mhm.
the enemy without? Uh,
And I
so
think,
it's not if I do it or an AI does it. What's the difference?
yeah, and I think like you're absolutely right there to uh again to an extent, but this is like a conversation where every sentence has to be
Yeah.
prefaced with that, but
Right.
um where like storytelling is definitely you need something to relate to for humans to be able to really like understand what's going on, and so that you can have whatever makes your thing
Yeah.
you need something for them to just kind of comfortably rest into.
Yeah.
uh
Handrail.
yeah, but what I'm as I'm thinking I'm about this, I think the point that we'll get to where AI can actually like 100% write your movies is the point where AI can consume the movies. So when we
Mm,
get to the point where you can have an artificial intelligence become an actual consumer, at that point you're going to have the ability to have an artificial intelligence create the content that other artificial intelligence will be able to relate to in that same manner.
Yeah, it needs to be spoken to so that it can write what speaks to it, is kind of what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, I can get that. I think that works and it does make sense, but I think I'm just a bit more cynical. And I think that there are movies that are already so lifeless that make hundreds of millions of dollars today that I don't think it needs to get that far. Because again, there's screenplays I could point to today that I feel like if you looked at it, you would jokingly say, this looks like an algorithm wrote it.
And I mean, even past that, if you look at the animation industry, anytime there's a large budget anticipated animated movie, releasing within weeks, if not days, of that movie are going to be at least a dozen knockoff movies
Asylum.
from like either other studios, like when you had Ants, you had DreamWorks produce, or when you had Bugs Life, you had DreamWorks producing Ants, but you also had studios in like Switzerland or in the Congo or France or China that are just producing a very cheap knockoff version that they're really hoping that somebody's grandma accidentally buys because it looks close enough.
That's Asylum's whole, budget structure is like, you guys are making Transformers, we made Transmorphers, and like you said, I'm hoping that your grandpa who buys you a Christmas gift, mixed it up. Not to mention, you guys also brought up earlier, well, I guess to mention, you guys brought up earlier Lights Out. There's an Indian knockoff ripoff Lights Out movie,
That's the thing though. Like y'all got me thinking about how much I love foreign indie films. Specifically, the ones I'm thinking of are the ones that like really hit me when I hit high school was Thai martial arts films. Because you had the Tony Jaa. Yeah, all right, yeah, okay.
No, Tony Jaa's awesome. I'm getting
into here. Yeah, dude, Ong Bak 2, The Protector. Like you had these movies. It was like and if you watch Ong Bak, there's no budget. There's no way it had a budget. It was, but it is so well done by people that by a dude who is like clearly an expert at Muay Baran, and also can like kind of act his ass off in like the like B movie martial arts way.
Well, it's also not a matter just of being, because you could have found 50 experts who would have sucked at making it watchable on screen. Like that's the thing I think he had, was knowing how to take his Muay Thai and shoot it in such a way and do the choreography in such a way that it was very interesting to look at. You can find so many indie movies made with guys who are black belts and whatever art, and their realism messes up the movie because you're like, yeah, sure, that's how you would do it, but it looks stupid on camera,
and getting and like that's what I like about like the bare bones budget stuff. Like even if it's not bare bones, like The Fifth Element was supposed to be like a 3-movie franchise, and they had to work within the constraints that they had. And I do really like the concept of like, these are the constraints and you have to be creative within them, which is how you get like, which is how you get like really good, interesting stuff. And
famously Jaws.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like all the mimic stuff, like there's the cash-ins, and there's the thought of I think Josh just told this story before, where like the producer that produced Winter's Bone is the same guy that did like Piranha 3D.
No, you're thinking of The King's Speech.
Yeah,
that's the Speech.
It wasn't the same producer. What it was, and this is what I heard, I haven't actually verified it online, but what I was told in film school, and I don't know if this is correct, was that the studio that produced Piranha 3D was a subsidiary of the studio that produced The King's Speech. And what they did was they had such a high profit margin on Piranha 3D because it was Eli Roth garbage that they said, okay, of our profit, we can take a big chunk of that and make The King's Speech, which will be a little bit cheaper than Piranha 3D, but it's going to make way less profit because it's for adults to watch, and so
yeah, it's an Oscar movie.
Yeah,
but those are important because even Blumhouse produced Whiplash. And so it's like when you're a studio that's known for making all of this garbage, horror movies and stuff like that, it's nice to have like that Oscar-y movie, in your repertoire to point to.
And again, I suspect that the first movie that is fully written by AI is going to be just done to see if it can be done, and will just be marketed and as, okay, this one was fully written by an AI.
And I think that's coming very soon.
Yeah,
as
I
like a
think
stunt very soon, like
I
next
I
week.
agree, and I think
Yeah.
it's going to be really bad, and it's also
Yep.
going to be a lie because
Yes.
100% I'm
Yes.
100% sure that they're going to release a movie that is just traditionally made and is not, and they're just going to say this was written by an algorithm.
It'll be a stunt basically of them saying,
Mhm.
okay, let's get you in a room and make me, because the reason I agree with you is because I've already seen it for comedy videos. As
Mhm.
soon as those AI things started to be a murmur, on a whisper of an idea on the internet of like, oh, you can feed it every Donald Trump speech and it will spit out a Donald Trump speech. People started faking those immediately,
Mhm.
to the point where I'm not sure if I've ever seen a real one. I think they're all some guy who was like, okay, because there's so many telltales of like, no, an AI would not make sense in a way that would be completely non sequiturs and
Wait,
points that don't
do you
connect.
mean there's
Are
never been a
there
real
real
AI
fakes?
fake Donald Trump speech, or do you mean there's never been an actual Donald Trump speech?
In the first, I'm not sure there was even a Donald Trump. I think it's a CIA. No, but like I think like for instance, I watched what was it? It was a College Humor made a video, and I can't again maybe it was real, but it stunk of the shit of lying, of like, no, we sat down and we're like, what would one of those things sound like? We've read enough of those to kind of get the idea. And their sketch was, hey, this script was made by an AI and they had to act it out. And it was funny because like, oh, what ridiculous stuff they said. But the stuff was just like, again, it's that thing where it's like there's too many basically quote unquote jokes. Like there wouldn't be any jokes. It would be nonsense. But there's all these like
Right.
punchlines that are landing of like, what's the funniest word to end this sentence with? Oh, it would be this one, It's like, oh, this bread tastes like glass. It's like, I don't think the AI writes that. I think you write that and pretend it's an AI. So I completely agree with you. I think that movie will come soon and be very cheap, but it will be a stunt thing
And
of like,
in
hey,
all
come,
honesty,
like the cell phone thing. What was that movie? Unsane. It was just a stunt. The whole point of the movie was, hey, we shot this on an iPhone 6. And it's like, well, come watch it. Why is it good? I don't know, but it's shot on an iPhone 6, and that's what that AI movie will be. Like, hey, this was written by an AI, but then you'll find out that it wasn't even really written by an AI.
And honestly, the other thing that somebody might do is claim something was completely generated by an AI for another like a movie that just absolutely bombs, like the next Space Jam 2.
It'll be like an Alan Smithy.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
where
It wasn't
they
us.
basically just pretend like, or they try to just rewrite history, like
Yes. Yeah.
who's that guy who came out to pretend that like Crystal Coke was or Crystal Tab was a hit that they put out on Crystal Pepsi.
I don't get
did
that
not know
reference
about
at all.
that.
Clear Tab, that was it.
I'm thinking of like even I mean like The Room, where Tommy Wiseau has kind of leaned into being like,
Yeah.
oh, it's a satire, and you're like,
I wrote it
nope.
as a joke. I knew it
Yeah,
was bad.
exactly. Yeah, we just
Right,
got to say
yeah.
that. It's like, I
Yeah,
hope so, buddy.
The next iteration of, well, first off, absolutely not. And then the second iteration of that is going to be, you're right, it's going to be, oh, actually that was AI assisted. And this, instead of saying, oh, the studio stepped all over my project, it'll be, oh, the AI, like the studio wanted the AI.
We've
to do the
deleted that
thing.
AI. They're no longer around anymore.
Yeah, that's another question, is like, how will it look? Will like there be one AI and well, here I guess my theory would be that the evolution would go as such. It would be that there'd be one prime AI that everyone is leasing, and then it'll turn into in-house AI. So there will be like the Paramount one and the name X, MGM one.
It's literally the plot of Space Jam 2, and I'm upset by that. I'm intensely upset now.
I have
Don
not seen
Cheadle,
it. I did not know that.
you don't need to. Just know that Don Cheadle is exactly what you're describing, and he sucks LeBron James into a video game.
What you need to
That
know
is on
about
the table.
Space Jam 2, it was a movie, technically.
Yes, yeah. It was one of the movies of all time. Right, and I think that's another one. Like Space Jam 2 is a movie about AIs, working with movies, but it also is a movie that feels like it was made by an AI. Especially, for a studio that is like, hey, can you please make this movie a backdoor commercial for all of our products? We're gonna have in the stands, the droogs from A Clockwork Orange in our PG rated children's movie, because like, hey guys, look, we have all these other properties in our franchise. It's like the dark universe where it's like, oh, the MCU is doing really great. Let's try 3 separate times to boot a franchise, built around Frankenstein.
And I think like if you look at Warner Brothers versus like the DC versus Marvels, only like the big budget films, not including the TV shows or animated movies, because if we include those, it's not a fair fight because DC has some excellent animated movies.
Yeah, but some terrible CW shows. So
but they're just like the big budget, like BVS, Wonder Woman 1984, whatever
Aquaman
year that was, like those compared to like your Iron Mans and Avengers, like there is a vast difference in quality because of the amount of restraint that Disney has allowed for some of the directors to or that has allowed the productions to give room for the directors, whereas DC has been trying to like write by committee from what I can tell and what I've heard.
Well, and Marvel has a Feige, so there's at least one guy who's a relatively consistent vision.
And we've even seen when what was his name? Ike, whatever the fuck.
The original head of Marvel Studios.
Yeah. Ike Perlmutter or
Ike Perlmutter. I think that's
right. But like when he was trying to do those movies by committee, and it really like showed, like when you had your Thor: The Dark World and Iron Man 2, and I'm trying to remember what else came out during that period, but there is some very forgettable Marvel.
An interesting thing too is like because when you say like Marvel movies letting the directors have reign to add some flavor to them, the first thing I think of is Thor Ragnarok, which is one of my favorites. But then you have Taika Waititi wrote and directed Thor: Love and Thunder, which was not great. And
now, having said that though, there's a lot of pushback lately of not pushback, but there's a lot of people who are pointing out that he seemed very uninterested in Love and Thunder, and that's what is happening.
Okay, that's the first movie I've seen by him that wasn't excellent, so I was very surprised.
He did some press where he seemed like he was basically like drunk and very was just kind of talking crap about the movie the whole time. And the theory that some people have is that he was kind of, not forced is such a strong word, but it was like he wanted to make Ragnarok, and then this was the one where it was like, fine, I have to make another one of these full Thor movies.
We just need to make another one. But I think at least the thing with Thor: Love and Thunder, like, it wasn't nearly as good of a movie as Ragnarok. It wasn't as good a piece of cinema, but it was still fun, and it still had like some like it had some spirit to it that like compare that to like Thor: The Dark World or like the Justice League movie, any version of the Justice League movie, and it's still like it's still a much more enjoyable experience. And I can say that as someone who watched both versions of the Justice League movie and can honestly say,
I'm so sorry, Will. I'm so sorry for you.
Yeah, it wasn't Joss Whedon's fault.
But I would also counterpoint, and I could not agree with you more. I got eaten alive on my channel for saying the same thing. But what I would push back on though is that like the intents with those two movies are so different. I don't think it's super duper fair to say that Love and Thunder is more fun than Justice League, because Zack Snyder had no interest in being fun. He wants it to be this dour, miserable, boring movie.
So I shouldn't. Okay, fun is a bad term, but it's enjoyable to be in the enjoyable to experience. So for instance, and like there's an anime that came out. It's called Black Summoner. It is bad. It is really bad. The writing is bad. The animation is bad. The CG is bad. But it's incredible.
This anime is bad, then you should feel bad.
Exactly. And like, there is no original concepts that made it into the show, but it is still enjoyable to watch because it is just like so bad. And
like The Room.
It doesn't exactly, and it doesn't know it's bad. But
any Ed Wood movie,
or any Ed Wood movie for sure. Actually, now that you mention that too, I think that that's where the AI system, if it were to do something today, actually maybe could find success, is being that niche, like, hey guys, come check it out. This shitty movie was made by this AI system, and it's the next room. It's the next Plan 9 from outer space. Come check it out. Like I said, in essence, that's what
Did I tell you my
conceit-
uncle starred in a movie called Plan 10 from Outer Space? That was a Mormon satire of Plan 9 from Outer Space. And the
Ouch.
entire cast and crew was excommunicated from the Mormon church for participating. True story. On IMDb, you can look it up.
I have to give Will and Carrie at the exact same time facepalm. So
That
great.
like there's just something so amazing that Josh comes from that pedigree that I almost can't handle it.
Maybe the only movie worse than Plan 9 from outer space.
I
but it's
watched it
like
once with my uncle, and I was like in middle school. I was like, "What
that's
is
gonna be
this?"
rough. Yeah, just the cringe factor has to be so high.
Oh, it was
But I mean, yeah,
fantastic.
what's
What's up, Nathan?
Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to interrupt. It
No,
could
you're
be
good.
worse. Called Plantain from outer space, and everybody's running around in banana suits.
Plantain,
Wow.
nice. Ouch.
Could have happened. Could
I'm
happen.
with it. This is true.
Wait,
But
does that
I-
actually exist? Because I'm thinking that could be a low budget.
That's my kink.
I just thought of the scene from the first episode of Community where the dean's watching that weird dress up thing and goes, "I hope this doesn't activate something in me."
Yeah,
So-
this
so-
better not.
Here's the funny thing about that. Like I still have this idea that's bouncing around in my head because I was trying to write a screenplay for a while. I kind of got pigeonholed into like, oh, you're a military guy, you should write like a military
Of course, yeah.
Mhm.
and like
Yeah.
it was an idea I'd had a while back, and like the more I tried to write it, the more I just like I really hated it. And I kept talking to Will and Josh about this, and I kept hitting walls. And then one day, like I think I might have been like messaging back and forth with Will. I was like, I can't get this thing to work because I can't come up with a good monster. And I said, you know what? Fuck it. They open up this well at the bottom of some city in Afghanistan, and you know what comes out? Fraggles. Fucking Fraggles.
Like from Fraggle Rock.
Right, like from Fraggle Rock. Fraggles from
word.
Fraggle Rock started
Yeah.
hacking these like Delta operators that all look like Chuck,
Hell yeah.
like Joe Manganiello and fucking Chuck Norris.
Yes.
And like, but I would want to play it straight, and the only way I would actually like explain it would be somebody saying this is something so cosmically horrifying that your brain has to process it in just
Oh,
the
that's
closest
fun.
way that it can think of.
Yeah, that's
But,
very
like,
Lovecraftian.
Exactly, but the whole rest of the movie is just like basically these guys like having their freaking Alamo last stand against Fraggles, and it still cracks me up because it's so stupid.
It kind of gives me a Slivers or Slither. What was that movie with Nathan Fillion and
Oh yeah,
James
so yeah,
Gunn?
Slither. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's very much a James Gunn idea. It might have come out after I watched The Suicide Squad with Will, and just like, you know what, let's make it
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. I mean, I do like the idea though of the that Lovecraftian kind of like, this isn't actually what they look like, but we can't even, like, the camera can't show you, your eyes can't, fathom what this thing is, so your brain just tries to retcon it into, no, there's,
And
I
that
mean,
just flashes
I'm
on
not
the
gonna
bottom of
lie,
the screen.
there's legs there, like there's totally legs there, and it'd be fun. Well, you know what else that reminds me of a little bit is the sphere. That whole idea was that everyone was experiencing just whatever is the scariest thing to them.
Oh,
And
you're talking about based on the Michael Crichton novel
Yeah,
with
yeah.
Dustin Hoffman, Samuel L. Jackson.
Yep,
Yeah.
Sharon Stone, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I saw that movie when I was young, and it scared the shit out of me, and I loved it.
I
then
thought it was really medium.
I
when
read
was-
the book though, and the book's really good and philosophical. I really like the book.
Mhm.
I remember thinking it was very medium until the very end, and it did one little thing that I thought was extremely clever, and it haunted me the rest of the movie, which was that they finally came up with the idea of how to escape, and we have a little montage, like this fast flashing happening of them escaping and remembering kind of what happened in the submarine up to that point.
And then it flashes back to them in the thing, and they haven't gone
One-
anywhere.
Well, actually what they did is it's a shot you never saw in the whole thing, in the whole movie up to this point, was there's just one like 2-frame shot of all of them standing in front of the sphere, and it kept going with like, oh, we escaped, and it gives you this feeling that like, no, there's a real possibility that they are going to spend, until they die down there looking at that sphere, especially because that was never a shot, so there's no point, it's not referencing something that you knew, as far as you knew, they never were all together there. So I like that idea that everything else is just kind of imagined of them getting out, but they're actually trapped in this mind prison,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean,
that kind of works as a metaphor for AI, honestly.
Expand on that, Will.
Expand on that, please.
where like it is.
He's like, I'm trying to bring us back. I'm trying.
Well, no, actually, I just thought that was kind of it is a funny metaphor because the AI is essentially just trying to create this consumable that you can't escape, where you don't understand the difference between an actual tangible thing and this artificially created thing,
Okay.
being that sphere versus like having that thought of, oh, I've escaped from this, when really you're just staring at the sphere still.
Well, and the AI itself, none of the ill intent is coming from the AI. The AI is just this, machine learning algorithm. It's coming from the lazy guy who doesn't want to have to, pay writers. And the other question is like, I think a lot of the value proposition that we think about when we start thinking about an AI generated screenplay or movie is the same feeling that we have when you look at a piece of art and you say, oh, that's kind of a cool abstract piece of art, and then as soon as they tell you an elephant painted it, immediately you're like, well, maybe you're not, but I am one of the people who immediately I go, oh, I don't value this anymore. This is the random brush strokes of an elephant that's playing around with a brush. And so it's like when so it makes me wonder, right, when you do watch that next Bloodshot 2 Electric Boogaloo, do you go, okay, yeah, it was a fine action film, whatever, I don't have any issues with it, and then someone says, oh, actually it was written by an AI, a good chunk of people early on, our generation, will at least have that, like, oh, fuck all that noise. And then it makes me wonder, give it a couple generations, maybe they get used to that and they say, I don't know, that's just how movies are made, who cares?
Yeah. I think honestly what it's going to be is there's going to be a lot of hype around AI at first, and then it's just going to get kind of die off. It's going to be like the Velveeta effect, where like you have this highly processed thing that we are told is edible, and like in and Velveeta might be a poor example. Margarine is probably a better example, because
those are both pretty on point examples, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, you have margarine and it comes out, it's more popular than butter, and a lot of that is because that it's cheaper than butter and easier to use in a lot of things. And in fairness, it has its usage where it is a better product to use than butter. And then like it just kind of gets overused, and then there's a lot of pushback against that for people trying to raise the value of something, where you have like the pushback of made with actual butter, or suddenly you find out actually this product that we assume was generally accepted as safe actually will cause you to get stomach ulcers or whatever, as happens so many times. And then it kind of phases back into the market where it's just used as a cheap substitute for the real thing, or for people that like vegans who unfortunately can't enjoy butter anymore.
Well, I agree. If I reframe it in not metaphor and say that, okay, so the AI thing starts happening, and at first there is the kitschiness of it. People are interested in this, like, oh, how weird, what a cute thing. Let me check this out. Initially, there will be the buzz of what's it like to watch a movie made by an algorithm. Then people will say, okay, well, these suck. Let's go back to watch movies made by people. But like you said, they won't go away. They will fall back into what I think ultimately their plan always was, which is like, this is how we make those tentpole, low effort Hollywood movies that in essence, we already use humans to behave like algorithms to make. When you're making the next Sonic the Hedgehog, this is not a passion, auteur project that some guy sat. I went out to a cabin for weeks and I wrote this screenplay, and
I thought Tarantino wrote the next Sonic.
Exactly,
what are you talking about?
Exactly right. Yeah. I think it was John Nolan.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's a bunch of guys who are like, okay, what are the marks you got to hit? What do all the last most successful kids movies look like? What is the, what's the runtime need to be? How many colors should we have, on a swatch, for any given frame? How fast should the frame rate be on the animated character to make him the most engaging to look at?
How frequently do we need a screen change to keep these little goblins from looking away?
Yeah. What's James Marsden up to? Let's go grab. It's that kind of stuff. And
is
at
Westworld
that point,
over? Is that still running? What's
right. They're just
which does actually. You just mentioned this, and I really want to jump in because it made me realize the real horror of this is that with children's cartoons, especially younger children's, like it is just going to be completely eaten by this, because it's something where, like, they're not going to complain if it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense or if it's not
Right.
good. But we're going to see
Because their stuff's already like that.
Yeah, and we're going
Yeah.
to see a substantial decrease in a lot of children's shows, which I think, I mean, it's coming up on that time for. There's always been, if you pay attention, a waxing and waning in the cartoon industry with children's targeted cartoons. Of you'll get like a period where you see a lot of worthwhile works coming out, and then something will change in the industry, and it'll kind of flood back to a whole bunch of garbage that is just because people assume that children won't care, and then eventually it'll start going the other way when somebody actually gets a passion project made, and then you'll see a resurgence of more valuable content coming out of the industry.
My concern though is that almost every time the value is coming out of specifically Cartoon Network. You know, it's like, I think with the exception of SpongeBob, it's like almost all of the shows I'm like, oh, that's actually pretty good for a kid's cartoon or whatever, is generally kind of the same network that seems to be the one who looks for these kinds of guys. Whereas Nickelodeon like couldn't care less.
Actually, I disagree strongly, because
Okay.
with Nickelodeon, we had a whole bunch of really good Nick shows in the 90s. They're also the ones that brought us Avatar,
Sure.
The
Yeah,
Last
okay.
Airbender.
Yeah.
But yeah, with Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network, like Cartoon Network had this amazing golden era with the cartoon show.
Yeah, Dexter's Lab and all that.
Yeah. And then they fell off really hard for several years. And
I guess
then
I don't know what the dark ages are because I aged out. So that just happened
Yeah.
to coincide with me getting older. And by the time I noticed again, it was when we were doing like Adventure Time and stuff like that, that I was like, oh, these are actually like, you know, someone cared. They're not necessarily for me, but like the regular show has absolutely like the thumbprint of someone on it. This does not feel algorithmically generated. It feels like someone had an idea.
Or like Gravity Falls.
Well,
I
and-
watched that with my
Yeah,
sister.
right.
Which is,
Oh,
was fun, yeah.
absolutely. Well,
Gravity
and
Falls
the cool thing about
Mhm.
those, like, oh yeah, Gravity Falls, the Owl House is one I'm absolutely addicted to.
Yes.
Like, there's a lot of animation right now that comes out of that. Like, it's very specifically like a mid '90s Cal Arts
Yeah.
like class.
Mhm.
But like,
Yeah.
there's all these guys, and the thing about that was like the Venn diagram of those guys is like a circle. Like
Right, right.
like Pendleton Ward, I think, worked on SpongeBob for a
Right.
bit.
Like early SpongeBob back when it was good.
Mhm.
Like when
early
when I
SpongeBob,
forget
like,
his name, Steven
first-
something, Steven Hillenbaum or whatever.
Yeah,
Soderbergh.
Steve Hillenbaum.
Yeah.
Hillenbaum was SpongeBob.
and so like those are like people that all had like really different and like diverse passions that like kind of got to go of it.
Yeah.
And Cartoon Network was a big one. Nickelodeon took a huge risk when it came down to Avatar, and it really paid off. Like there's a lot of like these people that
Well, yes and no, though.
through the
I would
system.
also say Avatar kind of made sense because they were riding the anime wave that was also happening. You know, Cartoon Network was doing
this is
Adult
true.
Swim, and anime was hot, so it was like, well, what if we had our own in-house anime, basically? So that I
Well,
could
and-
also hear the gears going of like, let's jump on this thing.
Well, the interesting thing about that too is the fact that like anime like when sorry, I'm gonna nerd out about like Avatar real quick. Like
Sure.
I almost said Brian Michael Bendis, but he was Ultimate Spider-Man. The guys that made Avatar, like they were like they're basically two weebs that like worked in different animation houses. Like one of them was actually like the one who's like the real martial artist nut is like he worked on King of the Hill. Like he was in that animation studio. And like when they brought this to Nick, they had such like an expansive concept that basically Nickelodeon was like, you know, like go for it. Like the like they got a real good thumbs up from actually some really good in-house people. And the cool thing about it was like these were guys that like legitimately were just like huge anime fans, and it just like kind of and it fit the market in a big way. It was
Didn't
kind of
Dave
like
Filoni work on Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Dave Filoni,
The showrunner of The Mandalorian? I believe he did.
maybe.
And the showrunner of The Clone Wars and Rebels. I'm pretty sure that was his first big gig, was Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yes, that
That
sounds
sounds
right.
right.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of my bigger issues aren't necessarily even with the cartoons. When I'm thinking about a lot of the crap that was being produced for kids, that is currently being produced for kids, it's that Dan Schneider era of the live action stuff. It's that like Victoria Justice show. It's the, everything basically post like the All That era, which not to say that that was fantastic either.
Yeah.
But
Hey, Keenan and Kel was quality though. Gotta say that.
right.
Yeah.
There's absolutely
Not that I've seen it in 20 years. I just remember loving it.
well, exactly, and I loved all that and stuff like that. I would guarantee that today I would still think it was pretty poor, but there again, there still was that kind of, there was a little bit of punk rock in there of them being like, hey, let's do SNL for kids, and kind of mess with this like interesting idea where it feels like even that level of soul was completely sucked out of it by the time you got to the iCarly's and things like that, where it really does feel like it's this, like I said, almost everything Dan Schneider touched was just the most like Zach and Cody, the hotel crap and all that, like Sweet Life, and these kinds of shows are the kinds of things where I'm like, these are rife, like these are like perfect type of content for an algorithm to be like, okay, feed me every episode of something that Dan Schneider helped make, and we'll try to edit out as many children's feet as we can, but from there on,
Jesus Christ,
the rest of it is going to be just like, this person walks in, audience claps, they slip on a banana, oh my god, like it's just these are things a computer can come up with.
Or like the modern equivalent of like, Are You Afraid of the Dark, where you have really poorly written horror stories, but it's aimed at kids, so nobody cares.
So who cares, right?
You lay off of Ryan Gosling's first acting job.
Was he actually in that show?
He's
Ryan
Canadian,
Gosling,
of course he was.
Ryan Gosling, that was that every like there are a good chunk of Canadian actors that as strict badasses that were in Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Yeah,
one of them was Ryan Gosling.
His second project was Young Hercules.
It's true. Yeah.
And
one thing I want to shout out that before we move on from this topic though is that the only animated thing I've ever written, and the only thing I've ever written that's aimed at kids, is my friend had a passion project. Shout out to Tegan Miller. She had an idea for a bilingual kids show that teaches really young kids like basic Spanish, with the idea that then it could be expanded to have different languages with different streaming services where you could select your language. And so I helped write the narrative portion of 6 episodes of a first season, and we've been shopping it around for almost 2 years now, and we've had some studios interested that have talked to us, and they've all said, hey, this is a really good concept, we like it, but there's just no other existing IP, we can't invest any money in this. So it is hard to get something produced when there's not that very basic mass appeal factor already built in.
Well, that's weird though. How could you say that when something like Dora the Explorer was massive?
Yeah, I get this is the feedback we're getting from studios, because I've looked at this stuff and I'm like, I don't have
what the
kids.
hell are you talking about?
And I'm
so they're saying it's the thing where like there has to be a comic or a book in order for it to be a script right now. That has to like if there was a kid's book
or a toy line, if we get a partner with a toy line that exists and kind of merge things.
Well, that's the problem though, because that's this thing where the whole thing has to be a beast now, where it's like, where's the room for the startup guy to show up with a good idea? Because if they're saying, oh, well, come back to us when you have a connection with, Disney or with, I don't know, whatever huge toy line, it's like, well, guys like us don't do that. That's what already pre-existing huge companies do.
Right.
And now we're in that AI conversation again, where it's like, this is the stuff of these giant corporations who want everything to be in-house. They don't want auteurs coming and doing cool stuff. They just want this really super smoothed out and clean and kind of designed and proletariat feed. It's like it comes out like pink slop, and you're supposed to just munch on it, and it's got everything the body needs, vitamins wise, and it's not really art. And so all of these ideas are connected by that same tissue of the person who wears a suit to work to make art. And back to tie it all back to Hodorowski, he made The Holy Mountain and great scene of the art factory and having this kind of just conveyor belt that is producing the art. And I think that is the world that the future of AI kind of fits into for, the replacing actors, replacing writers, like the stuff you already don't like about cinema. Imagine it basically crunched down times 5, and that's what our AI future will look like.
I don't know. I hope Carey's right, and that we're going to get a nice divide of easier to produce tent poles and then more opportunities for auteurs, but we will see. I think that's a good point to wrap it up. Is everyone cool with that?
Good to go.
Oh yeah,
I love it. Thank you for watching Nerds and Friends, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.